Before the awakening, the individual lives in service of the persona, that fragile structure built to navigate the expectations of the world. From childhood, we are handed names, roles, ideals, and aspirations that were never truly our own. We are told what success looks like, what it means to be worthy, how to behave, and what to chase. Thus, our motivation, that animating impulse we call ambition, is shaped not from within, but from without. We become actors on a stage written by others, performing identities that we never consciously chose. The student strives to be the best. The worker longs to climb the ladder. The lover seeks validation through affection. All driven by an invisible engine, the ego's hunger to be seen, admired, and secure. This ego, this artificial center, thrives on comparison and separation. It says, I am this, not that. I must become more, not less. Its motivation is rooted in fear, fear of irrelevance, of inadequacy, of death. So it constructs elaborate goals to mask that fear. The desire for wealth may conceal the dread of poverty. The quest for recognition may veil the terror of being unseen. And so, you move, you strive, you build a life around illusions that feel real only because the collective supports them. And your motivation feels like vitality, but in truth, it is tension, a tight string stretched between who you are and who you believe you must become. But then comes the fracture, the awakening, a moment, perhaps sudden, perhaps gradual, in which the scaffolding crumbles. You see it, how your efforts were shaped by the need to fit in, to be praised, to avoid suffering. You realize that the you who was achieving and performing was a mask, a necessary mask, perhaps, but a mask nonetheless. And in that moment of vision, something ancient stirs, a deeper consciousness, one that does not chase but witness, one that does not strive but simply is. This is when motivation begins to dissolve, not because you have lost something, but because something false has been stripped away. The fire that once burned so brightly was not your own. It was fed by borrowed wood, borrowed air. Without the ego's grip, the external world no longer commands your spirit. Titles no longer define. The urgency fades, and with it the false vitality you once mistook for life itself. And so you stand in unfamiliar stillness, misinterpreted by others as apathetic or lost. But this is not the apathy of despair. It is the quietude that follows disillusionment. The ego has lost its throne, and nothing has yet replaced it. This liminal space is sacred. You are not broken. You are becoming. To lose motivation in the wake of awakening is to return to the origin before ambition was born. It is to rediscover that the self is not a project to be perfected, but a mystery to be revealed. What comes next is not driven, it is guided, not forced, but invited. This is the beginning of true authenticity and the end of illusions chase. When you awaken, what you often experience as the loss of drive is in truth the collapse of an internal structure that once dictated your every decision, the persona. The persona is the social mask, the face we present to the world to function, to belong, to survive. It is not inherently false, but it is incomplete. It is crafted from the expectations of others, parents, teachers, culture, even your own idealized self, petite. It is a costume sewn from necessity, But over time it hardens into identity. You come to believe that you are this role, and you animate it with a tireless devotion. This role needs fuel, requires motivation, and the world supplies it in abundance. Praise, punishment, competition, reputation, success. As long as the persona is intact, you feel driven. You chase goals because they align with the role you've unconsciously accepted. The business person seeks profit, the artist admiration, the caretaker approval. But the drive is not entirely yours. It is inherited, reactive, and often compulsive. It serves the continuation of the mask, not the realization of the soul beneath it. Then something ruptures. It might begin with a question, a loss, a silence that cannot be ignored. You begin to see cracks in the mask. You realize that the persona, once so secure and empowering, is now a prison. You've played the part so long you forgot it was a part, and when the awakening begins, whether through suffering, introspection, or grace, the mask begins to loosen, to fall. Without the persona controlling your orientation to life, you find that the familiar compass no longer works. The goals that once stirred you now seem irrelevant or even absurd. The motivation to be someone evaporates because you now recognize that the someone was a construct and not the totality of your being. What once animated you, the desire to succeed, to impress, to rise, was tied to an identity you no longer fully inhabit, and so the drive disappears not through weakness, but through clarity. This is the point where many feel lost. The outer world continues as before, urging performance, productivity, ambition, but within you feel only stillness. The engine has stopped. You are not who you thought you were, but neither are you yet what you are becoming. This is the valley between masks and essence, between striving and presence. Do not rush to replace the lost motivation. Let the space remain hollow for a while. Let the echoes settle. The dissolution of the persona is not a tragedy. It is a liberation. It is the removal of a filter that once dictated what you could see and feel. And while the immediate effect is disorientation and inertia, what slowly emerges is a new orientation, one guided not by should, but by truth. In time, a different kind of impulse begins to stir, not a drive to perform, but a longing to align. It does not push or pull, it invites. And it arises not from the mask, but from the depths of the soul, now beginning to speak. There comes a moment in the deep inward journey when the shimmering objects once chased with such hunger, success, love, status, pleasure, begin to lose their luster. This is not because the world has changed, but because your vision has. The spiritual awakening does not bring comfort at first. It brings exposure. It is a stripping away, a ruthless illumination of the foundations upon which your former desires were built. And when the light falls fully, what it reveals is often unsettling. So many of the things you longed for were not born of wholeness, but of lack, of fear, of avoidance, of illusion. You wanted recognition, but beneath it was the fear of being invisible. You wanted control, but beneath it was the terror of chaos. You sought love, but not as a pure gift. You needed it to fill an inner vacancy. The desires themselves were not evil. They were simply distorted, shaped by wounds that were never seen, let alone healed. And so you built your life around these distorted impulses, believing them to be true reflections of your will. You chased a mirage, unaware that it was your own suffering projecting itself onto the horizon. The awakening unveils this projection. It turns the eye inward not as a retreat, but as a reckoning. You begin to see how so many of your pursuits were not towards something but away from something. You wanted wealth to escape the insecurity of your upbringing. You sought admiration to silence the voice that told you you were not enough. You moved, achieved, desired, not freely, but compulsively, and in the stillness that follows awakening, the compulsion fades, revealing the void it was trying to conceal. This revelation is not comfortable. It strips the soul bare. There is a grief in realizing that much of what you built was a defense against your own pain. There is sorrow in recognizing that what once felt like purpose was merely distraction. But this sorrow is sacred. It is the mourning of illusion, the funeral of the false self. And in this space of emptiness, something new becomes possible. Honesty. When the roots of desire are exposed, they no longer hold you captive. You no longer chase what you do not truly want. You no longer run from your own shadow. The emptiness that was once feared becomes a sanctuary, a ground zero for authenticity. From here, desire begins to transform. It is no longer tied to lack, but to alignment. It no longer clings. It flows. This is the silence after the storm, the absence that makes room for presence. You are no longer driven by fear because you have faced it, no longer consumed by illusion because you have seen through it. What remains is not ambition, but longing of a different kind, the longing for truth, for depth, for wholeness. And this too is desire, but it rises from the soul, not the wound. After the crumbling of false identity and the disintegration of ego-driven desire, what arises is often mistaken for a void. The world falls silent, as if the narrative of your life has come to an abrupt halt. There is no clear direction, no compelling goal, no animating desire pulling you forward. To the untrained eye, it appears as stagnation, depression, or failure. But this silence is not emptiness. It is not death. It is gestation. It is the fertile soil in which authentic purpose can begin to take root. You have been emptied, yes, but emptied of illusion. What filled you before was noise, the clamor of other people's expectations, inherited beliefs and fears masquerading as motivation. Once those voices are stripped away, the inner landscape appears barren. But this barrenness is sacred. It is the field cleared after a long and fruitless harvest, made ready for something real. The silence is not passive. It is active in a way the intellect cannot grasp. Beneath the still surface, the deeper self begins its slow emergence. This self does not scream for attention. It does not clamor to be seen. It waits, listens, and speaks only in whispers. It is from this space that true purpose can arise, not one crafted in the boardroom of the ego, but one that is born from the mystery of the soul. And like all things that matter, it does not arrive on demand. It unfolds in its own time, often through symbols, dreams, subtle longings, and quiet inner movements. This stage of inner silence is necessary because the psyche must reorganize itself. The structures that once held your identity have collapsed. Now the fragments are being reassembled around a new center, no longer the ego but something deeper, older, more whole. If you try to force your way back into the old world of striving and achievement, you will only succeed in rebuilding the prison you just escaped. Instead, you must learn to wait, to trust the silence, to allow something to form that does not originate from your will, but from your essence. Purpose born from this silence is not like the goals you once pursued. It is quieter, more fluid. It does not depend on outcome or recognition. It is not imposed from the outside, but discovered within. It may lead you towards simplicity or creativity or service. It may not look impressive by worldly standards, but it will be aligned with something incorruptible. It will bring not excitement but peace, not frenzy but a quiet knowing. So when the silence comes, do not fear it. Do not rush to fill it. It is not absence, but invitation. It is not the end of meaning, but the space from which meaning can finally speak. And though it may take time, what rises from this ground will not be another illusion, but a purpose rooted in the soul's truth. Something you do not chase, but become. In the wake of awakening, when the familiar structures of identity have collapsed, and the noise of the ego has quieted, something ancient stirs within, the self. Not the social self, not the reactive mind, but the deeper archetypal presence that has always lived in the depth of your being, waiting. It does not emerge like a sudden light switch. It rises like the moon, slow, mysterious, full of shadow and symbol. It cannot be commanded, it must be invited, and more than that, it must be integrated. The self is not a concept. It is not a higher version of your personality. It is the totality of who you are, both light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, human and divine. It is not here to help you return to the world's race. It is here to reorient you entirely. And because it operates beyond the ego's language of achievement and comparison, its arrival can feel disorienting, even threatening to the parts of you that once craved clarity and control. Integration of this deeper being is not an intellectual process. It is not a matter of learning, but of transformation. And transformation is slow, cyclical, non-linear. The self reveals itself in fragments, in dreams, in impulses you cannot explain, in sudden revulsions or unexpected longings. These are not random. They are messages from a deeper layer of psyche trying to reshape your outer life to match the inner truth. But because the ego has dominated for so long, it resists, it questions, it clings to the known. And so the work begins. To bring the unconscious into conscious life. To give space for this deeper presence to reshape your values, your direction, your way of being. It requires the courage to let go of who you were. It asks for silence, attention, humility. The self does not express itself through urgency. It expresses through symbols, through patterns, through quiet certainties that settle in your bones before they ever reach your mind. This process takes time, and more than time, it takes trust. Trust that even in stillness, something is unfolding. Trust that the disinterest in the world's games is not a defect, but a sign of realignment. The deeper self does not speak in ambition, it speaks in authenticity. It moves not through willpower, but through resonance. When it finally does begin to express itself in your life, it won't come as fireworks or declarations. It will come as a gentle clarity, a new quality of presence, a sense that you are no longer performing, but simply living. Allow it. Allow the slow descent into depth. Allow the dismantling of what no longer serves. The self is not a destination to be reached, but a home to be remembered. And each step toward it, each act of listening, each surrender to the unknown, invites more of it into form. This is not the path of motivation, it is the path of meaning. And it begins, always, with patience and the quiet willingness to be remade. Before awakening, we often mistake our most passionate pursuits for expressions of strength, vision, or identity. We chase success believing it proves our worth, seek love thinking it will complete us, strive for control in hopes of shielding ourselves from chaos. Yet beneath the surface of these intense motivations lies a truth rarely confronted. They are not born from wholeness, but from fracture. They are not the voice of the soul, but the echoes of our wounds. What we call drive was in many cases a compensation for something lost, denied, or broken within us. The child who grows up unseen becomes the adult who hungers for recognition. The one who learned love must be earned will later strive endlessly for approval, even if it costs them their peace. The one who felt powerless may spend a lifetime chasing influence and control. In this way, the wound becomes the architect of ambition. And because these patterns are unconscious, we rarely question their source. We simply feel the pull and assume it is right. But the awakening comes like a crack in the mirror. It reveals what lies beneath the surface images. It exposes the tangled roots of motivation, the way pain has disguised itself as purpose. And this is not a gentle realization. It is piercing. For to see that your most celebrated efforts were often strategies of avoidance is to stand on unsteady ground. You realize you are not truly creating a life. You were defending yourself from feeling. This moment of seeing is both the unraveling and the liberation. The wound once hidden can now be met, not as a flaw to overcome, but as a sacred gate to understanding. You begin to feel the pain beneath the striving, the loneliness behind the need for attention, the fear behind the pursuit of perfection, and in allowing yourself to feel rather than compensate, something begins to shift. The wound is disarmed, not by fixing, but by presence. As this process unfolds, old motivations lose their grip. You may feel less interested in the games you once played, less enchanted by rewards that once seemed vital. Others may see this as apathy, but you know it is something deeper. The machinery of compensation has stopped. You are no longer moving from lack. You are learning, slowly, to move from wholeness. This creates a space where authentic desire can begin to emerge, a desire not to prove, but to express, not to escape, but to connect. It is quieter than the old drive, but truer. It asks not what the world will give you, but what you are here to give. This is the transformation that awakening offers, not a rejection of action, but a reorientation of its source. To confront the wound is to reclaim the self. To release the compensations is to uncover the true longing buried beneath them. And in this uncovering, the soul begins to speak, not in fear, but in freedom. There is a quiet and often terrifying moment in the soul's journey when the old fire goes out. The ambitions that once lit your mornings no longer stir you. The urgency that once drove your actions has vanished. You sit in stillness, not because you choose to, but because something within has refused to keep pretending, and in that silence a shadow falls. The belief that you have become lazy, broken, or lost. This is the lie the world tells you when it cannot understand the inward path. But what is happening within you is not collapse, it is alchemy. The fire that once burned so fiercely within was never truly yours. It was the false fire, the compulsive drive of the persona, the mask crafted to meet expectation, to chase safety, to win love through performance. It crackled with energy, yes, but its fuel was fear. Fear of being nothing, of being unseen, of being unworthy. That fire could move mountains, but only by devouring you in the process. It left you exhausted, disoriented, hollow, because it demanded that you betray your inner truth to maintain outer validation. Now, that fire has gone out, and in its place is a strange quietude. You may feel ashamed of this stillness, confused by your disinterest in continuing the game. But you must understand, this is not a failure of will. It is the soul refusing to be misused. What you are experiencing is not decay, it is transition. The false fire must die so that the real light can emerge. Real light does not blaze, it illuminates. It does not demand that you prove your worth through ceaseless striving. It waits for you to see that you are worthy even in stillness. This light is not interested in spectacle. It is subtle, inward, slow. It is the quiet clarity that arises when the noise of becoming has been silenced. And to reach it, you must walk through this valley where nothing seems to make sense, where no external goal can soothe the restlessness inside. This is the sacred pause, the chrysalis between the life you constructed and the life that longs to be born. The caterpillar does not grow wings by effort, it dissolves into formlessness. And so must you. What feels like laziness is a refusal to participate in illusion. What feels like brokenness is the dismantling of what was never true. You are being prepared for a deeper kind of movement, one that comes not from compulsion, but from alignment. The world may not honor this transformation. It may demand that you return to the script, reignite the false fire, resume the performance. But your soul knows better. It knows that something more authentic is awakening. And though this light is faint at first, it will grow. It will not burn you. It will guide you. You are not lost. You are being remade. Not into someone better, but into someone real. So now, in the dim hush where the old fire has died and no new blaze seems to rise, you stand not at the end, but at the threshold. What you have lost was never truly yours. It was borrowed from the world, fed by fear, shaped by wounds and sustained by illusion. What you are now entering is not darkness, but depth. The silence that surrounds you is not absence, but invitation. You are being called, not to perform, not to strive, but to remember. This is not the path of the many, but of the few, who are willing to descend, to listen, to wait. You are not lazy, you are not broken, you are becoming honest. You are undergoing the sacred undoing that must precede any true becoming. The self is not built through ambition, it is revealed through surrender. And though this journey asks everything of you, it gives in return something the world cannot offer. A life not built on reaction, but on revelation. Let yourself rest in this strange in pursuit. Let the false fall away without grasping to retrieve it. Let the questions hang without rushing to answer. For what is emerging now is not a new goal, but a new way of being. One that does not burn with the fever of fear, but shines with the steady, enduring light of truth. And when that light begins to lead you, not with force, but with quiet knowing, you will understand. What you thought was the end of your motivation was the beginning of your liberation.